there's no mention of blood, there's no mention of the altar or sacrifice. Welcome back, everyone, to our sub-series, Stories Behind the Scriptures. And today, we're going to take a close look at one of the most quoted statements attributed to Jesus, when he said he came to give his life as a ransom for many. But did Jesus really mean a sacrificial death for many, like the Levitical offerings in the temple? Or was he speaking of something else entirely? So let's have a look at the text in question, Matthew 20 and verse 28, where we read, "Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, in the Greek, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, that's exactly what it says. A ransom in place of many. That's what the Greek states. The question raised is, does this imply a temple-style sacrifice? Or is this the origin of the substitutionary atonement principle? You know, the principle where one death takes the place of another death. In this place, Jesus' death taking the place of animal deaths, which took place in the temple. Or is this about liberation and service? All right. We're going to turn to the Gospel of Matthew again, but this time the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. And we have the Shem manuscript, which you'll find in the British Library. And we're going to have a look at that version in Hebrew, right? And this is the version that's been preserved by Jewish scribes in the Middle Age, likely based on much older traditions. And it really offers a striking variation. So let's read Matthew 20 and verse 28, but this time from the Hebrew Gospel, where it says, to give his life to redeem many. Now again, I'm not going to try and read the Hebrew pronunciation, but that's what it means, to give his life to redeem many. And the Hebrew word for redeem means just that, to buy back a slave or delivering someone from danger. And this word comes from Deuteronomy and Exodus, but not from Leviticus. It's quite important to keep that in mind. This Hebrew word is found in Deuteronomy and Exodus, but not in Leviticus. So, what we see is, in this version, there's no mention of blood, there's no mention of the altar or sacrifice, no concept of a substitution, you know, one substituting for the other, atonement in atonement. No, Jesus is not portrayed really as a Levitical offering, but as a redeemer, a servant who brings about liberation. Now, if we just have a look at a little table, you know, I love my little tables, and just compare the two, the Greek Matthew and the Hebrew Matthew, the Shem Tov. In the Greek, it says ransom for many, but in the Hebrew, it says to redeem many. And they're two different words. They mean different things. Now, in the Greek Matthew, this finds echoes in Greco-Roman terms, whereas the Hebrew Matthew finds its echoes in the Torah and Jewish concepts. In the Greek Matthew, it could possibly mean some sort of substitute. But in the Hebrew Matthew, it means deliverance, not substitution. Now, let's not forget the context of this statement by Jesus. What was the context? Well, the context was he was rebuking his disciples for craving status. He teaches that greatness comes through service, and that he himself is giving his life not as a payment to appease God, but as an act of liberating love. And of course, this ties into the Deuteronomy principle of speaking to God, which is a redeeming principle, or the redeeming of his people from slavery, because that's what Deuteronomy is all about, the redemption of people from Egyptian slavery. It does not focus on blood atonement. And so what we find is Jesus is drawing this tradition of redemption, not a ritual sacrifice. So we got that clear. So how did this phrase get reinterpreted the way we come to know it today? Well, because later writers, especially Paul, developed this idea of a ransom into a full theology of substitution, the substitutionary sacrifice, Christ's sacrifice in place of the animal sacrifice. But of course, that's a development, not what Jesus meant originally. See, to redeem many is not the same as to be a temple sacrifice. Jesus offers liberation, not ritual blood payment. So, if we follow Jesus' own words, especially in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, what we find is that he saw his death as a redemptive act of service, not some temple offering. His mission was to free people from oppression, not to fulfill a sacrificial system which he and the other prophets before him so openly criticized. That's food for thought, isn't it? Well, if that's given you something to think about, please let me know in the comments below. Do you think Jesus taught temple sacrifice? Or do you think he was teaching something far deeper? Now, if this challenges your thinking, please like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.